to Eggs and Issues, a monthly business forum bringing timely economic discussion to the region for 35 years. Presented by the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. Thank you to our 2019-2020 sponsors and partners. Presenting sponsors, Bank of America and Martins Point Healthcare. Cooperating sponsors, First Light, WEX, and Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. Community Corner sponsor, Goral Palmer. Parking sponsor, CV and Mahar Engineers. Reception sponsors, Clark Insurance, KeyBank, and Veril. Tomorrow's Leaders and Entrepreneurs sponsors, Springborn Staffing Center and AAA Northern New England. Media partners, News Radio WGAN, The Forecaster, WMTW, and Maine's CW. Maine Biz, with production support provided by Headlight. And thank you to our 2019-20 special community partners. Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, Spectrum Healthcare Partners, the University of Southern Maine, and Southern Maine Community College. And now, please welcome Portland Community Chamber President, Jim Cohen.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming in. Welcome to our December Eggs and Issues, the monthly business breakfast of the Portland Community Chamber. Thank you also for braving the snow and the rain, whatever it is out there, in coming in to join us this morning. We're very excited about today's program. You will notice on all of your desks, speaking of snow, we have brochures for Carnival, Maine, which we're very excited about coming. Portland is a winter city. It's great that a group has come together to help embrace that winter so that all of our businesses who otherwise have a slow time in the winter, it's an opportunity to keep that momentum going through the winter months. So hope you can join Carnival, Maine. Again, my name is Jim Cohen. I'm a partner with the Veril Law Firm, and I'm honored to serve as the volunteer president of the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. The Portland Community Chamber remains very focused on advocacy efforts in the City Hall in Portland, as well as in the region. And on that note, I would like to introduce our newest staff member of the Chamber, Joe Marrow. Joe is our new Director of Advocacy. Joe, if you could stand up and introduce yourself. We're very excited to have Joe on board working with us. There's a lot to do, and Joe's going to really help us to get that done. Now, be sure to sign up for the Chamber's advocacy-focused newsletter and follow us on Twitter, as Joe will be using all of these channels to share regular updates. Now, I didn't see whether there are any city councilors here in the audience. If so, raise your hands. Not today. Well, we thank the City Council and Mayor Snyder for all the good work that they've done and will do in the weeks and months ahead. Now, today's topic is what's next for legalized marijuana in Maine. On November 8th, 2016, Maine voters approved Question 1 and joined 8 other states in legalizing recreational use of marijuana, the retail sale and taxation of adult use marijuana. And with us today is Erik Gundersen, who's the director of the Maine Office of Marijuana Policy, who will discuss the regulation and oversight of Maine's medical use and adult use marijuana industries and what the future may hold for both now that the state is poised to begin the licensing process for adult use establishments. However, before we move on to today's program, a quick preview of some upcoming events. Tomorrow evening is Welcome and Congrats Elected Leaders, which is a reception that the Portland Regional Chamber is sponsoring with the Greater Portland Council of Governments. And next week is Growth Basics for Business, as well as Kegs and Issues. Our annual awards event and community celebration, Imagine Portland, is a little over 1 month away, and on Wednesday, January 29th at Brick South, registration is open and our award recipients will be announced later this week. Stay tuned. We are extremely excited about the event and our award winners, and we hope to see you next month at Imagine Portland. The generosity of our sponsors allows the Chamber to continuously enhance our events. A special thanks to our Eggs and Issues presenting sponsors, Bank of America and Martins Point Healthcare, and to each of our partner sponsors who make this event possible. Thank you for your generous and continued support. And a warm thank you to our special community partners, Anthem, Spectrum Healthcare Partners, University of Southern Maine, and Southern Maine Community College. These partners support each of the Portland Regional Chamber's initiatives as well as our entire event season. Thank you. Our sponsors make this possible. Our members give us purpose. I'd like to take a moment to recognize our newest members to the Chamber. And you'll see them on the screens behind me. And these organizations have joined us in the last month, and we're very pleased to have them on board. So, I also want to welcome one of the largest and most active business communities in the state with all of these new members, and we look forward to working with them in the coming weeks and months ahead. So a big round of applause to all of our new members. You can learn more about these and all of our members on our online member directory. AAA Northern New England and Springborn Staffing provides support for our Tomorrow's Leaders and Entrepreneurs program, which allows area high school and college students to attend Eggs and Issues. With us today are students from, among others, Southern Maine Community College, University of Southern Maine, Falmouth High School, and Gorham High School. So if you could stand and have a warm welcome. Thank you. Headlight Audiovisual provides us with our technical support. And the video from today's keynote presentation will be made available shortly to today's Eggs attendees, and past videos can be found on our website and YouTube channel. And our FMI sponsor is the Portland Public Library, who will be providing more information on today's topic. All attendees will receive this information from the Chamber via email in the coming week. Goral Palmer is our 2019-2020 Community Corner Program sponsor. Today's featured nonprofit organization is Strive. Strive is a South Portland-based nonprofit that supports over 1,000 tweens, teens, and young adults between the ages of 11 and 24 with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Strive was founded in 1999, starting as a teen drop-in center on Congress Street, and has now grown to include over 13 programs. Strive focuses on creating independence and opportunity through social, educational, recreational, and vocational supports and programs. Learn more at pslstrive.org. In recognition of their great work in our community, the Chamber will be making a contribution to Strive. And I would also ask that any representatives of Strive with us today stand and be recognized. Thank you very much. And one last note, that we are again partnering with Maine Green Power to power all of our Eggs events from now through the end of the 2019-2020 season. Maine Green Power is the voluntary green power option for electricity that is available to Maine homes and businesses. So please consider looking that up and signing up if you can. Now on to today's discussion on what's next for legalized marijuana in Maine. Our presenter is Erik Gundersen, Director of the Maine Office of Marijuana Policy. Gundersen is no stranger to public service and marijuana policy, having been closely involved in efforts before the Maine legislature to modify the laws governing legalized marijuana after recreational use was first passed by Maine voters. Prior to joining Governor Janet Mills' administration, Erik served as policy advisor in the office of the Speaker of the House. In his current role, Gundersen oversees all aspects of licensing, regulation, and the oversight of Maine's medical use of marijuana and adult use marijuana programs. So please join me in welcoming Erik Gundersen here today.
Good morning, everybody. First, I want to say thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here early on a Maine wintry morning to talk with everybody about marijuana. I'm sure you're all terribly excited, but before I get going, I apologize for the bio. A little bit longer. Had I known you're going to read the whole thing, I probably would have sent a shorter one because it makes me seem a heck of a lot more important than I actually am. So again, my name is Erik Gundersen. I am the director of the state's newest state agency, Maine's Office of Marijuana Policy. And as it was described, that office is home to both our state's medical program and our soon-to-be adult use program. So let me find the clicker here so you guys can follow along. But in today's presentation, there are essentially 5 things that I want to make sure that we accomplish here. I think first and foremost, we want to give you an update exactly what's been happening up in Augusta with our office, the Office of Marijuana Policy. I want to make sure that you have information that you can use that's important as it pertains to both the programs that we oversee. Third, I think it's incredibly important, considering the work we do and the impact it has on all communities across the state, businesses, internal and external stakeholders, to have an open line of communication from our office to you folks for all the work that we'll be doing. And then basically to facilitate a conversation, and also I'm sure I'm going to get some questions at the end of the presentation, and really discuss what may be next when it comes to marijuana in Maine. So first, before I get into the presentation itself, there's some terminology that I'll be using that it's incredibly important that we're all on the same page to help clear up a little confusion that we hear on a day-to-day basis for people that don't live it every day. First and foremost is the difference between marijuana and cannabis. Actually, there's really not a huge difference here. The reason that we're the Office of Marijuana Policy, and you'll find that I use the word marijuana instead of cannabis, is more or less just because that's the terminology we use in state law. They're essentially interchangeable, the same plant. However, cannabis also encompasses the hemp plant. But for the most part, we use the term marijuana. Caregivers and dispensaries. This is a lot of confusion. This is actually speaking to program participants on the medical side of the house here. So we have 8 dispensaries statewide. As of only a few weeks ago, they were in the 8 health districts across the state. And then we have the caregivers. And I think the original intention was to have those caregivers fill the regional void, essentially, making sure that patients had access to the medical cannabis they need that weren't in a close driving proximity to one of the dispensaries. They also, as of a few months ago now, they're allowed to operate what we call caregiver storefronts, retail storefronts, which is the majority of those marijuana shops that you folks see. Cultivation, that's easy. That's just essentially growing the marijuana plant. Concentrates is important too. Concentrates are essentially manufactured marijuana flower. They go through an extraction process, and they're turned into this product, a concentrate, oils, tinctures, dabs, that are then used either to consume or then turned into a different marijuana product. Manufacturing is the process, essentially, to take the marijuana flower and turn it into those other products that we see, the edibles and whatnot. THC and CBD. There's a little bit of confusion around these two terms. So THC is the psychoactive ingredient, chemical, in the marijuana plant that gets you high. And then CBD is the more medicinal, not psychoactive ingredient, more commonly found in the hemp plant. And then finally, the difference between adult use and recreational. Adult use is our legal term, and we prefer that one just to really reiterate the fact that this is a program geared towards individuals 21 and plus. And then finally, statute and rules. I'll talk a lot about both of them. It's just different levels. Statute, as I'm sure we're all well aware, is set at the legislative level. And then rules is really the work that my office does. And I always talk about it like building a house. The legislature will pass statute, pass a law, which is the framework, and then the Office of Marijuana Policy will come in and write the rules, which is really putting in the hardwood floors and the fine finishes. So a great place to start is talking about our mission statement, and I can't speak to how important this piece is. Every Monday morning in our senior staff meetings, I make one of my staff repeat our mission statement to really drill down why we're here and what we're doing and what guides our decisions. And I'm pretty sure they hate me at this point because of it, but I really feel like it's an important piece. So it's to ensure the health and safety of all Mainers by effectively and responsibly licensing retail marijuana establishments. It's so important. As regulators, what we're doing is trying to make sure, although a lot of the early news was how quickly we were working, I can assure you that everything we did was with the public's health and safety at the forefront of our minds. And also our vision statement, we take pride in developing good faith partnerships with all stakeholders in this process because there's just so many. We also have 5 guiding principles. You can see number 1, just kind of drilling that in. But I think 4 is an important one, and it pertains to today's event. We really make an effort to make everything that we're doing at the Office of Marijuana Policy as transparent as possible and clearly communicate with the public in general and communities across the state. Because as I said earlier in the presentation, everything that we're doing at the office and these 2 different programs really do have an impact on our state and the public in general. So we've really made an effort to be as transparent as possible. So to speak a little bit about our office, and this is where I get a little geeky and nerd out a little bit because I'm really proud of the way we set things up and the work that we're doing. But there's 5 main areas in our office. First, we have our policy division. As I'm sure you're well aware, the legislature has thousands of bills each session, and it just seems like so many of them have to do with marijuana. So this is where we interface with the legislature, help shape our programs, and is also where we do the majority of our rulemaking, which is a significant lift in our office for all the rules that we've been developing. The one that's been in the news lately is our licensing division. It's a team of 9 individuals, which is are tasked with processing these already 80 or 90 applications that we've gotten to date on the adult use side, but they're also tasked with registering our participants on our medical side as well. And then just speaking to the adult use applications, it's a serious job, it's a serious lift. We've been getting applications in, and a complete application can run anywhere from 100 to 200 pages. So just to give you an idea of the work that we're doing in our licensing division. Whoops. Our compliance side is comprised of 9 people. Again, we're a compliance-first organization. If you saw in our guiding principles, compliance every day, enforcement only when needed. Applicants in the adult use program are going to go through so many hoops in order to get a license. We're going to work with them to help get them to compliance. We're not about basically coming in, kicking in doors, and shutting businesses down. We will work with these applicants to get them where they need to help understand the regulations. My favorite division, no offense to the staff in my office, is our data analytics division. This is very cool, very forward thinking, and I'm going to speak a little bit more to this piece a little bit later on in the presentation. And then engagement and community outreach. Again, I have our Director of Engagement Community Outreach here with me today, David. Such an important piece when we're talking about the stakeholder engagement that we're doing on our end as we move forward with rolling out the adult use program. So a couple updates here. As far as staffing is concerned, we were established in February 4th of this year. And on that day, I was seriously sitting by myself in a basement office in the Cross office building trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do. I had really no idea. So it's incredible to get to the point where today we're a state agency of 26 people, and in just a few weeks, we should be fully staffed out at about 33. Other major milestones are our rules that we've been developing. In the news, we read a lot about the regulations that set up the regulatory structure for our adult use program. And we had to move quickly with those because those were major substantive, meaning that we had to get those rules to the legislature and get their blessing before they went home. But there's multiple other sets of rules that are really guiding the work that we do and setting up the regulatory parameters for both programs. Systems, a couple huge IT projects we're working on. BioTrack THC is our state's track and trace service. Basically, it's our #1 tool to ensure compliance within the industry. At any one moment in time, we can take a snapshot of all the products and where it is in the system. So really excited about that. We've moved into the 21st century. We've put our licensing system online so applicants can apply for these licenses from the comfort of their own home. And then the data warehouse piece, again, is speaking to our data analytics. where we're going to be bringing in marijuana-specific data to really make data-driven decisions, that I think will really benefit the state and both our programs. And then outreach, we talked a lot about outreach. So important to involve as many people as possible in this process, whether it's public health experts, public safety experts, the industry itself and towns. And then just some administrative work that we've done that's important to highlight. We have a new website. There's hundreds of forms and documents and applications that we've processed or developed in order to pull off this licensing regime. So to go through a brief history of when we were established in February to where we've gotten now. So February 4th, like I said, the Mills administration established the Office of Marijuana Policy. It was me. And now, like I said, we're a staff of 26, but that was an important date. In March of 2019, we hired Friedman & Koski, a consulting firm out of Colorado, to assist with our development of our adult use rules. And then I think it was 4 weeks to the day that we brought them on, we made our first draft of rules public. Nearly 80 pages, I think it was nearly 80 pages of regulations. Just an incredible feat, work that we are incredibly proud of, especially when you consider we involved 9 state agencies and the general public and the industry in that process. It was a very dark time in my life, but we pulled it out, and I'm doing much better. I'm happy to report. In May, we had the public hearing for those rules. We're actually in this very room. And then I think it's important, we provisionally adopted those rules this summer, got them to the legislature, and they were passed, and the governor signed them on June 27th. November 4th, we finally adopted those rules, which will really kick the program into high gear. The application process has began. I'm sure a lot of us have seen it in the news. We had a staggered rollout, but now we're at the point where we are accepting all applications for all establishment and individual identification cards. And it's a pretty exciting time, a little nerve-wracking time, but very proud of that accomplishment. When we were established, that was one of the goals that we put forward, was to make those applications public in 2019. So we were incredibly happy to deliver on that commitment that we made. So you'll see some of those conditional licenses being processed and hopefully start going out within the coming weeks or months. Like I said, those applications are fairly robust. They're long. There's a lot to go through. So we don't have a definitive timeline when the first one will go out, but within that time frame. March 15th is an important date only because of the fact that the state's Revenue Forecasting Committee has pegged that date as the day that we'll start seeing tax revenue coming in from retail sales. So I don't know if we'll hit that date. There's a good chance we will, but there's obviously a lot of things to go through before we get to that point. And then you can see we've kind of hedged a little bit in this presentation. We've given ourselves 12 months. At some point in 2020, we'll be issuing those active licenses and pitching, establishing a launch date for those retail sales. I'm sure we can talk more about that. I'm sure I'll get more questions about that. So this slide really just is to illustrate to everybody here that, again, it's so important to understand that our office is in charge of 2 separate programs, which are guided by 2 separate statutes, which are significantly different from each other, which presents some challenges to us, but we're also planning moving forward in a way to align the 2 programs, understanding the differences between the 2 programs as well. So adult use medical marijuana, adult use and medical marijuana, these are just the different facilities that we're, at least my office is in charge of regulating when it comes to the 2 different programs. And again, this slide can illustrate some of the differences between that. Roles of municipalities. This is a really, really important piece here. Understanding that when the legislature rewrote the MLA, they gave a lot of power to the towns and municipalities to be able to establish what they want to do within their towns. Most notably also, they made the program an opt-in. So early on when you saw reports of towns putting in, what's the word that I'm looking for? Moratoriums, thank you, moratoriums. If you see that now, it's really not necessary because when they made the opt-in, they essentially put a blanket moratorium over the state. And to date, I think we've seen 25 or 26 towns opt in. So everybody likes to talk about the money here, the tax collection, the tax piece. This is the money that the forecasting committee has come up with as far as what we can expect to see. So the first box is always the one that people like to go to. So you can see in the first year, if we're starting in March, that's not a full fiscal year, but we're projected to bring in $4.4 million. The vast majority of that is going to be dumped right into the general fund, but we also have what we call our public health and safety fund, which is run and administered by my office, which is focused towards two things. A public health and awareness campaign, basically to teach people how to properly consume, don't drive while intoxicated, and then law enforcement training, which we're working with law officials to figure out the best way to roll that out. So here's a little map, and this is actually on our website, of towns that have actually opted in. And again, speaking to the authorities that we have given towns, they're able to opt in, not necessarily for the program, for all types of establishments, but when they opt in, they can opt in only for retail shops, or they can opt in only for cultivation, or they can opt in for cultivation and 3 retail shops. So to date, this is the list of towns that have opted in and what they've opted in for, which I think are going to be where you're going to see a lot of these early establishments being opened up. And again, this is right online, so if you're interested in really doing more of a deep dive into this, just visit OMP's website online. So some of, again, what's allowed and what's not allowed for towns. Again, a lot of the power has been given to towns to really set up their own zoning. They can limit the operation hours that the state has set and set buffer zones around schools or expand those. And some of what's not allowed is expanding those operating hours or really going less than 500 feet buffer zone between these establishments and schools. So quickly go through some of our licensing criteria here, because this is kind of where we're at and a lot of people are asking these questions. And the licensing process to get a license in the adult use program is fairly detailed and what I'll call robust. But the first thing any applicant needs to do is to get what we call our IIC card, our individual identification card. All employees that want to work into the program or all principals of an establishment or application all have to have these before they can start the process. So that was the first application that we made public. And to date, I think we've gotten 500 plus of these, and we've actually started processing them. So to get your IIC, part of that is a criminal history background check, among other things. But that's really the first step you need to do in order to get an application or in order to get a license. The establishment licensing process is a 3-stop shop, right? So first they come to the state of Maine, make sure that they're a good character, and they're going to get what we call a conditional license. Basically, they have to pass, again, that criminal history background check. They have to prove to us that the residents are Maine owners, and they have to basically show us how the ownership structure of their establishment is set up before they get that. After they get the conditional license from the state, they then have to find a host municipality. They have to find one of these towns that has opted in that want them to open up their shop. And again, speaking to the power the legislature gave the towns, these towns are able to set up their own licensing regimes. So it'll be interesting to see really how long that process takes once we get to this step, because we have conversations with those towns, but it's very hard to know exactly what the turnaround time will be there. Once they get what we call our local authorization, they come back to us for an active license. This is another very detailed step in the process where they're going to start giving us all of their plans, their security plans, their facility plans, their updated operating plans, and we need to go through these extensive documents to really make sure what they're proposing fits the letter of the law before we give them their active license. So just a couple of numbers that are good to know. 2.5 ounces is the legal limit of marijuana flower for an individual to have, and 5 grams of that concentrate. 12 is what you're able to have as far as seedlings, which are like baby marijuana plants, or immature marijuana plants, which are the plants that are right before maturing or flowering or budding. As far as edibles are concerned, 10 milligrams is the set limit for an individual serving size. And as far as the product being packaged, it can't be more than 100 milligrams. So if that's the case and they got to the 100 milligrams, you'd see a product that had 10 individual serving sizes, not going over that 100-gram limit. As far as the retail stores are concerned, some of the products that are available for sale there, you're going to see products essentially that are used to consume marijuana or marijuana products, but the legislature drew a fine line as far as not allowing the additional sales of cigarettes or alcohol. You might have seen in the news a few weeks ago, we were happy to launch our universal symbol, kind of a fun piece. You can see it up on the screens. What's noteworthy here is when we were trying to decide what our universal symbol was going to be, basically the symbol that indicates, hey, hold on, this product contains marijuana, was looking at other states, the other states that had come before us. And the funny thing was, I think we had like 6 or 7 other examples in front of us, but none of them were universal. They were all different. So we had this crazy outside-the-box idea, why don't we use somebody else's to try to actually make it a universal symbol? So we ended up working with the Cannabis Control Commission down in Massachusetts. We pitched this idea about sharing this universal symbol because of our regional proximity, and they agreed. So we are the first 2 legalized states to actually share a universal symbol, which I think is pretty cool, and we thank them for that. Whoop. And then I kind of blew through this presentation pretty quick because I wanted to spend a lot of time on this slide. Kind of what are the next steps? What are we going to see from the Office of Marijuana Policy? Well, I talked a little bit about BioTrack THC. It's our track and trace system. Again, it's the main tool that the state is going to use to ensure that people are in compliance. We need to use it on our end, and the industry is going to use it on their end. So we're in the final legs as far as implementing that program. And when you first see it, we're going to be implementing it on our medical side, which is a huge shift for that program. So we've really tried to go as far as we can to make sure that that impact on that program is minimal as possible, understanding that it's drastically different from the way they've been operating for nearly 10 years. That way we can get it up to snuff by the time we start rolling out these adult use licenses. But very cool, we're going to get a lot of great data from this program or this system, and it's just a really important piece and a lot of work for our office. O&P data warehouse. Now I've talked a lot about this, and this is, again, probably my favorite thing that we talk about. But really, it's forward thinking. Data is such an important tool that we can use to ensure that both of our programs are where we need them to be, not only for the state, but for the industry, towns, and for all stakeholders. So we had this crazy idea, why don't we try to find as much marijuana-specific data as we can and bring it in-house to make those data-driven decisions that would benefit our programs. So what we've started and what we're going to continue to work on, which is a huge project, is essentially we're going from state agency to state agency, and even outside of state agency, to try to find all of that marijuana-specific data. In a lot of cases, it actually doesn't exist, but we're going to try to find a way to make it exist. Data like school expulsions that have to do with marijuana consumption, cases of driving while under the influences of marijuana, emergency room visits from marijuana, poison control center calls specific to marijuana, employment terminations specific to marijuana, whatever it may be, try to figure out a way to get all that data, get it in-house, in real time, and now when you understand, we overlay that with all of the data that we're going to have from our track and trace system and our licensing system, we can really use that to answer some difficult questions, again, with the goal of the public's health and safety in mind, but also the operations and the efficiencies of the program. So it's pretty exciting to see that we would be the first state that I would have this real-time data warehouse to be able to make these real-time decisions. So it's a big project, it's very exciting, and I think our office in the state should be very proud of the fact that we're undertaking such a huge project, but it's definitely going to pay off in the end. Statutes and regulations and program alignment. So moving forward, what my office is going to be working on, we were under such a time crunch to make sure that we got the regulations to set up a framework for the adult use program that we planned ahead and really are going to roll it out in phases. So we're in phase 1 right now. Once we go live, we're going to move into phase 2, where we take a step back, assess the program, its strengths, its weaknesses, and really decide what we need to do to make the program better for both the state and for the industry side and all stakeholders across the state. So that will be phase 2. And then secondly is talking about the alignment enhancements of our 2 programs. Now this is such a huge project and so important. And I talked a little bit about it earlier. So we've had a medical program that's been running now for nearly a decade, if not more than a decade. And for whatever reason, it hasn't got the resources or the attention that it's needed. And it's really been run like by a libertarian model, which is fine. And then in 2016, the voters of Maine come along and they say, hey, adult use marijuana, we want that, which is essentially a tax and regulate model. So it's oil and water. So it's difficult for a bunch of different reasons for my office, operationally being one of them, in the efficiency of government, and program participants, and all stakeholders. There's a lot of confusion. So one of the big things that my office is going to be working on is what I've termed the lift and shift, to align the two programs one another to benefit not only the state but the users of both programs. Now, a lot of people in the medical program may get nervous when I speak about this, but I can assure you, and I assure them, that the Office of Marijuana Policy fully understands the difference between patients and consumers, which is the main difference between the two programs. So even though we're going to make an attempt to lift and shift and align the two programs, there's still going to be two separate programs serving two separate purposes with the full understanding that there's a drastic difference, again, between patients and consumers. So that's some of the work that we've been doing. There's still a lot to come. Again, speaking to 2020, we're going to see the first retail sales of marijuana in the state, which is incredibly exciting. We understand a lot of people have been waiting a long time for this, but also from our perspective, it's a little nerve-wracking, but I'm sure if we continue using the process that we have, that will be fine on the state level, we'll be fine on the municipal level, in the industry, and the consumers of the product will get what they want. But with that, that really concludes my presentation for you. I hope it was beneficial. I hope I gave you some information that you can use. And then I know we do have time for some questions and answers. So I'm happy to do that at this time, as I'm sure there's going to be plenty of them. But thank you. Thank you. So I will say, thanks, David. I will say there are two microphones here on either side of the room. And I think the process is, if you just have a question, you can just step up, line up, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Hi. I have a question about compliance and how it relates to federal law. Where does the state of Maine, as an official, you're an official state agency, how does all this line up with federal law?
It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
So how do you deal with that?
We deal with it the best way possible. So yeah, marijuana, it's illegal on a federal level. It's something that all the other states that have gone through legalization have dealt with. And it presents numerous challenges because there's really no roadmap or guidance. I will say, at least our office has gone off the guidance of the Cole memo, which you may be familiar with from the federal level. Really just making sure that if you're going to do this, you do this with, again, the public's health and safety at the forefront of your mind. Keeping it out of the hands of children, making sure that you're taking the proper steps to make sure that you properly regulate it and you keep it contained and safe. And that's what we've been doing. But there's no good answer. It's illegal on a federal level, and we put that out there for all the participants to know, and yeah. Probably not the answer you're looking for, but that's the best one I got. Yeah, right? Yep.
All right, that was basically my question, but I just wanted to follow up. Is there, your office, you have a relationship with the Department of Justice in Washington?
Nope, we don't. Not to this point.
There's no discussion at all?
No discussion at all.
Because the FBI legally could show up here and start arresting people.
So we do have a working relationship with the FBI because they're the ones that actually run our national criminal history record checks. And we've been in communication with them about the proper way to do that. So there is a connection there. But as far as like a working relationship with DOJ on a federal level, it's mostly state government agencies that we work with.
I guess I'm not sure I understood. Can the FBI still show up here and arrest people? I mean, is there some sort of arrangement that they come there to give you notice?
I mean, that would be a good question for the FBI. I'm not quite sure. I'm sure since it's still, again, illegal on the federal level, yes, you could see that. But again, we operate understanding that 7 states now, I think 7 or 8, because Michigan just came online, have all rolled this out. And the feds haven't taken any action in any other states. But again, we understand that this industry is based around a drug that's federally legal. So we're doing on our end what we need to do to help ensure that it's properly regulated with no guarantees or insurances for any of the participants in the program. And I think for the most part that they understand that when they get involved and they apply for these licenses.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I just want to say that was an excellent presentation.
Oh, well, thank you.
And to be commended for all the work you've done the last few months.
Thanks.
Of course, there's a but. So I would just like to mention that in terms of your health and safety campaign, I hope you will add a major campaign that addresses the very well-known public health impacts on youth and pregnant women.
Yep.
We know that the developing brain, marijuana is very harmful to the developing brain, which is anybody under 25. And it can precipitate, for instance, lifelong psychosis, and regularly does, as well as lifelong memory issues. And I'm saying this in part because I know we have a lot of youth in the audience. And then the second one is pregnant women, because again, the developing brain, it impacts and can be lifelong. And I'm the Chief Health Improvement Officer for Maine Health, and a number of our practices, they are telling us that the #1 drug that they see on a urine tox screens in pregnant women is THC, and that it's very common that pregnant women are consuming it to counter early pregnancy nausea.
Yep.
And yet, if the word's out there that it's natural and it helps with nausea, it's a very hard, as individual physicians cannot counter that very well without the help from the state and a major campaign. So I hope you're going to put some of that money into that.
And
So
I'm
thank
glad
you.
and I go through the presentation pretty quick, understanding that there's usually a lot of interest and questions. But this topic is a conversation that we could spend days on, right? So just real quick to speak to the public health and safety campaign that we will be rolling out. So up to this point, we've been working with the Maine CDC to really help bolster their messaging and what they've been rolling out. Understanding that the funding for our public health and safety campaign was tied to tax revenue. So we don't have any yet. So we've been working with them and setting the stage so when we start seeing that money come in, we have grand plans to set up a very robust public health and awareness campaign. And we're no dummies. We'll be working very closely with public health officials to make sure that we get that message right, because exactly what you're talking about is really our job and priority as regulators. And again, to involve those people. So yes, you will be seeing that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Glad I made somebody happy today.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the
Yeah, you're welcome.
presentation and all the information. So, I mean, we've talked about federal stuff, but I'm going to talk specifically just about the state of Maine,
Sure.
since that's what we're talking about today. There's people in jail for possession of marijuana.
Yep.
Now it's being legalized, and businesses as well as the state of Maine and tax revenue are going to be making millions off of that. Everybody in this room can see the problem here. Will your office be doing anything to get these people out of jail, or is that out of your scope of work?
Yeah, no, we won't. And we definitely understand that. And there are bills in front of the legislature, I think in the second session, that have to do with this. So where the Office of Marijuana Policy is in charge of regulating these two programs, that's more of a policy decision that is going to be talked about and had in Augusta. But yeah, that's not something that we're weighing into as a state agency.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hey,
Hi.
I noticed when you were talking about communities that had opted in that my community was not listed. And so I was wondering, are there ways to petition or encourage your community to opt in, or is that process?
No, that's exactly how it happens.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Could you talk more about that?
Yeah. It's tough as a state regulator. We don't want to be put in a position where we're encouraging other towns to opt in, but we do realize that there's some underlying policy challenges with only having 25 towns opt in, right? I think one of the reasons that you legalize marijuana and set up a regulatory structure for retail sales is to get rid of the black market. It's funny when some public municipal officials talk to me and they say, well, we're gonna opt in and we'll do cultivation, but we're not gonna do the retail sales, or we're not gonna do the retail shops. I'm like, well, it's happening in your town, just not in a regulated environment.
Sure.
But yeah, that's what I would do. If you want your town to opt in, or if you're a prospective licensee and where you want to set up shop is not there, you have to have those very basic conversations with your elected officials on the town level.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for the informative session.
Sure.
Can you just provide some guidance around the legality or whether or not there is a conflict of interest around growers and retail locations owning and operating testing facilities?
Yep. I mean, there is. There is. So Maine law is specifically written, so you're able to own multiple licenses. You can own multiple cultivation facilities as long as it's not more than like 30,000. You can't have more than 4 retail locations. But if you're going to own and operate a testing facility within Maine, you can't be tied to any other license within the entire state to make sure that that licensed facility is indeed independent and the results that we get back are skewed, but are not skewed. But yes, so they do need to be completely independent of all other licenses in the state.
And that's the same IIC process that you have to go through?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking to work or set up shop, set up a testing facility, you still are going to need those IICs. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my question has to do with tourism. So we know that Portland, especially the greater Portland area, has a strong tourism play, if you will, going with the beer market, certainly lobster in the state of Maine. So we know that other states like Colorado, who have legalized marijuana, are quite a ways ahead of us. But I work for Visit Portland, actually, and we promote in the greater Portland area. And we are a membership organization like the Chamber, and we are getting inquiries from a lot of the entrepreneurs who want to advertise with us.
Yep.
And so we have a lot of complications there because much of our advertising, or at least half of it, let's say, is in print. So if somebody puts an advertisement in our visitor's guide and that is shipped out of state, is that putting us at risk?
Yeah, so advertising is a tricky one, the way that we set up the regs. But I don't think the danger comes in when you're shipping that out of state. It can't be put on. It can't be put in an environment where it's more than likely going to be put in front of somebody 21 and under. So right now, because we've been starting to get a lot of these questions, and again, if anybody in these rooms has these questions, again, please engage with our office because we're going to work with you and help you get the answers that you need. But we're currently putting together internal policies for advertising, understanding that there is a lot of gray area there. So trying to help people, businesses, understand what's right and what is wrong. But in print, it's tough. I mean, if it's a print about, I don't want to say too much and kind of lock myself into anything, but I think the way that we're going to try to go about viewing it is if your magazine is about quilting, I think there's a reasonable argument to be made that people under 21 aren't going to be purchasing a magazine about quilting. However, if it's in something like, I don't know, Sports Illustrated or something that the younger folks like to read, I don't know if that's a thing or not. I have no idea. That's really where we're going to draw the line. So we're going to have more clarifying guidelines coming out.
So specifically on that, a lot of our information is distributed along the highway and at visitor centers across the state. There's a total population demographic going into those locations. So, but what I'm hearing you say is it's a predominantly adult versus child.
Yep, that's more or less the guidance that we have. We're operating with, understanding that it's not great, so we're trying to bring out a little bit more clarity around that.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
yeah. And feel free, reach out to the office and we'll work with you on that.
Hi.
Hi.
How will you ensure people are buying legally sold marijuana rather than the much cheaper, untaxed, illegally sold marijuana?
I mean, that's a huge policy question to unbox. And that's a tough one. And again, I think the legislature did a good job at setting the tax rate to 20%. Speaking for other states that have legalized it, it's fairly low. And the conversation around that tax rate was the fact that they want to make it competitive with the black market. So I think the two keys are accessibility, making sure that consumers of marijuana and marijuana products have the ability to get it in a retail shop that's close and convenient to them. Again, you'll hear a lot about weed deserts. If huge swaths of the states don't opt in and they have no access, then the black market is still going to live there. But I think there's a conversation that we've had, and we've actually seen it in other states to a certain point, that even if the legalized marijuana is at a slightly higher price point, that consumers are willing to pay a little bit more for the convenience of going in, not having to deal with whoever, and understanding that that product has been tested, it's safe, and it's just a little bit better environment to get your marijuana or marijuana products. But great question. It's something that we're going to be grappling with, I'm sure, when I'm long gone. So,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi. Thanks for all the work you've done in the last year. It's been substantial. I was just looking for a little more clarification on how the inner workings of the OMP, if you will. With the 9 individuals in licensing, are they specifically the individuals who are going to be making the decision as to whether or not a license will or will not pass? If your license doesn't pass, are those 9 individuals who you would address, or would they come directly to you?
Yep.
And then referencing you specifically, is your position appointed, and is that going to turn over with new administrations in the future?
So my position is not appointed, and I could see where it may be turned over. But back to the licensing division itself, so yeah, there are 9 individuals, but the way it's structured is we have a director of licensing that runs and manages the licensing team. Underneath our director of licensing, we have 2 chief licensing investigators. They're the ones that have been really tasked with going through, really breaking down the ownership structures that we see, really doing the deep dive into the operating plans, the cultivating plans, to digest and make sure that it meets the letter of the law. And then I'm sure once we get some of these more complex applications, that there's still a lot of questions and like tough decisions need to be made. It'll be raised to the director of licensing and myself and our deputy. And then we're also having conversations with the Office of the Attorney General in Augusta to get legal resources that we currently don't have to help sift through some of these real complex ownership structures.
Okay, so essentially it's 2 people that will be processing the licensing as the applications come in.
Digesting the vast majority of the information, but as far as we also have the other support staff that will help with that process for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Good morning.
Morning.
I work with students as a career advisor, and recently have had several students come in and ask about getting involved with the marijuana industry as a growing industry in our state. Working for a college that accepts federal funds, my hands are a little tied in regards to how I can advise them. Do you have any advice for our office as how we might be able to support our students in their interests without, I guess, stepping over a line that we shouldn't in our office?
I'm not supposed to give legal advice, but yes and no. So first of all, to work in the industry or to be a licensee, they have to be 21 or older. So if they're under that, they can't play, right?
Right.
I think if they wanted to be on the state side, the regulated side, I'd be happy if you sent them to us.
Fabulous.
But as far as if they wanted to be on the other side of the house or on the other side, the private side, that's a little bit more difficult, and it would be tough for me to kind of give them guidance. There are a number of associations that have formed that would be good resources, and I'd be happy to share those.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you. I
Sure.
appreciate that.
No problem.
Good morning.
Hey.
I get the idea is that something is caught with testing from before the product reaches the retailer or manufacturer.
Yep.
Do you have or have you gone through the process of which you implement a recall if that happens to bypass the testing and then something happens later down in the product line?
Yep, so you're talking about a feature in our track and trace system.
Yeah.
And I believe that's the trace piece, right? So if somebody ends up consuming a marijuana or a marijuana product, they end up getting sick, we go back and find out that it's this specific product. Within the system that we're implementing, our track and trace system, we're able to walk back and figure out all the different products that have been associated with that batch that are actually making people sick.
Yeah.
So our compliance team can go out and collect that and get it off store shelves. Yes,
Awesome.
that's definitely
Cool.
one piece.
Also, a second question.
Yep.
So with your management system that you kind of showed there for you guys, is it built where it will set alerts for you, or is it still dependent on a human being going through those reports to actually know that something's going wrong?
So 2 things. A, it does set certain alerts for us. And I mean, around a recall or a public health crisis, yeah, those are in there. But we'll also have our compliance team that have credentials to go through there on a manual level as well. And then third, again, our long-term goal is to take all of that data that's inside our track and trace and also move it into our data warehouse. We won't get those real-time alerts once we move that data into our data warehouse, but we'll be able to, again, use that data to make decisions and fine-tune our 2 programs. But yes,
Thank you.
we do. You're welcome.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Hi. Thank you for your presentation. My name is
Sure.
Becca Bolas. I work for the Maine Public Health Association,
Yep.
and I'm really interested in the data that you're talking about. collecting, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about how you're using it to inform regulations and policy, how you're working with other state agencies like DEP, and then the third part of that is how you're working with other states that have already legalized it for some cross-state data sharing.
Yeah, so right now we're in our data discovery phase where we're actually going to be going to these state agencies. We have a list of about 25 questions that we want to answer. I figured it's a good place to start. I think my IT guys wish it was probably like 5, but it's 25. So we're going to figure out if these different state agencies have marijuana-specific data. And it turns out the vast majority of them don't. So we're currently working on a gap analysis to figure out, well, if you don't have that data, how are we going to get that data? And a lot of it is going to come with, I'm sure we're going to have to push through the legislature or find a way to pay for it. But it's so important to what we need to do on a public health and safety front that I'm going to give it all the resources it needs. As far as how we work with different state agencies, there's a lot. So we're very close with the Department of Agriculture because a lot of the licensing, what they offer pertains to the licenses that we're dishing out. DEP, a lot of the environmental regulations, we need to hold our applicants to those standards. Department of Public Safety, obviously it's a law enforcement issue, and we'll be working with them on our law enforcement training. We've already met with them trying to figure out whether it should be an online course. It should come in the form of a grant program. So if you're a local law enforcement agency and you want to send somebody to get DRE training, we can pay for it. Or if we're going to incorporate some type of marijuana-specific training in the academy. So we have that type of relationship. And then obviously with Department of Health and Human Services, the Maine CDC, we have a close working relationship with them when it comes to our public health campaigns, helping set up our testing regime and regulating our labs. And then as far as other states, it's so helpful. I cannot speak to how helpful those relationships are. The marijuana regulated community on a national level is a fairly tight-knit group. So I am able to pick up my phone and call counterparts in Colorado or Massachusetts and ask them really, really important questions and get answers pretty quick. So that happens pretty much on a daily basis.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, this may sound like a plug, but I own an indoor go-kart track here in Scarborough.
Love it. I've been there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And as you can imagine, our customers, we specifically have non-intoxicated driving because of what we do. It's fast and can be dangerous.
Yep.
As an employer and an owner and operator, it's very difficult to explain to people who are intoxicated on marijuana that they should not, number one, be driving on the roads, but number two, that we can't allow them to go-kart.
Yeah.
And there is no way. I mean, with alcohol, I can easily just pull out a breathalyzer and they're there, and if they're O2 or below, they can go racing. If they're O2 or above, they're done. They have to sit down and wait until they're sober, and I let them leave, or call the police if it's really bad. What do you recommend for all the businesses out there that have restrictions like I have, and insurance and liability issues, and what are you going to do to really up the information to drivers that you shouldn't be on the highway in an intoxicated state?
Yep. A couple questions there. The first one, and the most important one to point out, is you're right. There's no test that actually exists today to tell if somebody's under the influence of marijuana and not in a place where they should be driving a vehicle. There's not. If somebody figures out a way to do it, you're going to be a very rich human being. So right now, the way that they're doing it, at least in the conversations that we had, they're going through, just as far as traffic stops are concerned, is if you're under the influence, if you're unable to drive a car, whether it's alcohol or marijuana, you're not able to. So I don't really have a good answer for you. It's a tough situation to be. I've never gotten the go-kart question before. But again,
You'd be surprised how many come in.
I'm totally, I believe you. I believe you.
We usually tell when they go right for the pizza.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I don't have a good answer for you. I really don't. But if you can tell that they're impaired, then I think as a business owner, you're within your rights to say, hey, it may not be alcohol, but you're in no shape to be driving a vehicle or a go-kart for that matter. So hopefully there are advances in technology that can help address this. This would make my life easier. It would make your life easier. It would make law enforcement's life easier. I'm sure it's going to come at some point, but as of right now, we're faced with those challenges. So that's where we're at. So I think that's it. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I'm happy to be here. Thanks, man.
Thank you so much, Eric. That was terrific. There's a lot that we're going to be learning over the weeks and months and years ahead, and it's great that Eric and his team are working hard to make that process work smoothly. So another reminder that registration is open for next month's Imagine Portland annual event. Remember to stay up to date with all of our events by subscribing to our newsletter and following the Chamber across all major social media platforms. Upcoming events are also available on your tables and at the registration, so please take them with you. Thank you for starting your morning with us each month. We look forward to seeing you at our next Eggs and Issues in the new year. So thank you and have a great rest of your day.